Oh, hey, I didn't hear you there. I'm just sitting here by my fireside recording an episode of the Daily Solutions podcast, but you're welcome to join me. Come on in. Hey, everybody. Hey.
They're not going to respond. They can't.
Hello?
You can't hear them respond, I should say. Some of them might be responding. All right. So today is another one of those kind of basic questions. If you're running a float tank center, you've surely gone through this before. But for those of you who haven't, how long does it take to fill a float tank for the first time and have it ready to float people?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it depends on the float tank.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Absolutely. And the process that you're going through.
Yeah. And
your just grit and determination as well.
Yeah, your sheer willpower. So probably the biggest thing that makes a difference on time is whether your float tank has an inline heater, also called circulation heaters or not. So for those of you that don't know, most float tanks are heated through just a few different methods, whether they have like a heating pad or some sort of heating system under the tub or around the sides of the tub or in the walls or something like that, that's kind of heating the water in the air. And then the other method is you actually have a part of your filtration system. You know, there's a chunk of pipe that is a heater. Like it's like kind of a metal tube that's got like a heating coil inside of it that gets really hot. And just as the water passes by it, it heats the water up. And
heats it up really fast.
Real fast. I mean, it makes sense. It's way more efficient, right? Like you literally have a heating coil directly in the water you're trying to heat versus trying to have a heating pad heat through fiberglass, which is kind of a natural insulator, and like eventually get its way into the water.
Yep, or even through a liner too, which those still take quite a while to heat up.
Yeah.
So let's do the slower process first. Like let's say they're filling up a tank. All it has is under tank heaters. There's no special process for heating up the water other than whatever's coming out of their water heater. Right.
So I mean that's where it starts. Like you really want to be using water that's as hot as possible. And that's just because the process of the salt dissolving sucks heat out of the water. So it's an endothermic reaction. It actually like makes the water colder. It's kind of crazy. You can take a clump of salt and pour hot water into it, and by the time it hits your hits your hand going through all the salt, it'll be cold. Or if you have salt in the tank and you're stirring it with your hand, you just feel pockets of cold water like around your hand as you're stirring it.
It's always the thing that I say whenever people ask if we dump the float water in between every single person. And I'm just like, I mean, it would take, in this case, probably a good 18 hours to fill up the tank.
8 to 12 is usually
8 to 12,
something like that. Yeah. If you're diligent. So if you do it in this like hardcore way. So for us, that means like we will fill it as much with hot water from our hot water heater as we can. And then it actually pays off to wait for your hot water heater to heat more hot water up than it does to put cold water into the float tank. Because it just makes the process of dissolving it more difficult too, dissolving the salt. Because at a certain point, because the saturation point of the salt differs based off of temperature. The colder the water is, the less amount of salt you're going to be able to dissolve in it. And unless you're at that 93, 94 degree float tank water, you're not even going to be able to dissolve the full amount of salt you need to in there. So if you're trying to mix salt into cold water, like it's just not going to work. Like you won't even at a certain point be able to mix it in. And certainly it will mix in less easily. I mean, it's kind of like mixing sugar into iced tea versus hot tea.
Yep. And so there's also this process when you're filling it up of kind of doing it, we do it directly into the float tanks. Some people will kind of pre-mix water into buckets and kind of mix it up that way.
Yeah. It's pretty intense though.
It's a little bit of an intense process. Again, to each their own. Manufacturers will also have different recommendations for your specific float tank.
Yeah.
So be sure to check with them. Some don't seem to care if salt gets sucked into their pump and they're running the pump the entire time, even when salt is dissolving. Other manufacturers want you to have the salt all mixed up in the water before you're running the pump system.
Yeah,
so.
And that's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think any pump manufacturer is going to tell you that that's great for the pump to have salt crystals shooting through it. To me, it's kind of like worth it. Like we've had pumps for a while. I mean, magnetically driven pumps that.
Yep.
I don't really notice a lot of salt damage on them. And if this pump was going to last us 10 years and because we're constantly using it to mix salt, it lasts us 9 years, to me, that's like a fine payoff. Like I'm happy to have a pump that lasts one less year if it means I get to kick it on and have it help me like mix the salt and water around much more vigorously than I can do by myself.
Yeah, that said, definitely be careful with it, and especially if you have a mechanical pump and not a magnetic pump. I would be a little cautious, or at least follow your manufacturer's recommendations for what they advise.
But in this method, so like putting in hot water, adding salt, mixing it up, adding more hot water, adding more salt, and just kind of going back and forth like that and working your way up, we can usually do it in, I mean, it only takes us maybe like 2, 3, maybe tops like 4 hours to actually mix everything in. And then the rest of the time to get to about 8, sometimes 12 hours is kind of just spent waiting for the water to get back up to temperature.
Yeah, and I mean, it totally depends on the heaters too, whether you have fiberglass layer in between there, you're going straight through a liner. The entire process really can take varying degrees of time and go up anywhere from, a degree an hour to a couple degrees an hour, even down to like half a degree an hour, depending on what you're doing for your heating inside your tank.
But then if you have one of those inline heaters, it tends to go a lot faster because now you're heating the water way faster, and it just means like you can dissolve the salt faster and get up to temperature faster, and the whole process is decently improved by having one of those.
Yep. So again, it's that same sort of 3 or 4 hours to actually get everything in there, mixed together, make sure that your water level is actually up to the point where the pumps can suck it in, things like that. And then probably another couple hours, I would say, of running the
maybe even slightly less. Like they're pretty efficient and powerful.
Yeah, so maybe in the 5-hour kind of range.
Yeah, that sounds right, I guess.
4.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is something that manufacturers are aware of too. So a lot of manufacturers are actually making their tanks with the intention of trying to make it easier and quicker to fill them up and get them up to temperature and things like that.
Yeah, these are getting better for sure.
And you're actually seeing this combination of almost for this specific reason, inline heaters and under tank heaters. Because once you have the water all filled up, the inline heaters are good in case there's an emergency and you need to bring things up to temp really quick, but they don't do a ton once it's filled up. So inline...
Yeah, they'll save you some energy. I mean, they help in between floats.
Yeah.
Take a little bit of the work off of under the tank heaters, but this is certainly one of their superpowers.
Yeah, which is really nice. So there you have it, kind of fumbling through that one. And if it's your first time filling this up, it'll definitely take you a little longer. So I definitely recommend planning on an entire day to actually set aside to get the hang of this and learn the ropes.
It's really like much less of an exact science than you think. Like you might think it's like add 327 pounds of salt, like step 1, and then put in like 62 gallons
like
of water.
Recipe.
Yeah, it's really not. You just kind of dump it all in there and like slowly hone in on the right specific gravity, and you can be way more like kind of haphazard with it, and it's fine, and it'll get you there. And there's really not too much of an actual science to it.
And so one thing to watch out for when you're doing this as well is salt collecting on the bottom of your tank if you do have under tank heaters.
For sure.
And you not mixing that in appropriately and letting it sit there. Because what'll happen is that salt will gather right over the heaters. And salt is basically a big heat sink. And so all of the heat that wants to go into your water is instead going straight into your salt. And it's crazy. It'll actually harden on the bottom of your float tanks and turn into basically big crystalline sheets. And you can feel your water and it's still just icy cold. And you feel the bottom where there's these salt sheets, and it's incredibly hot because it's sucking up all of the heat. And so especially in something like a linered tank system, these things get really sharp, and I get scared about ripping the liners. You can burn out your heaters in the case like that because the heaters don't want to be tossing all of their heat into this already hot body.
Yeah.
So it can cause a lot of problems. So one thing to be really adamant or diligent about, I guess, during those first few hours when you're mixing everything together is making sure that stuff isn't collecting on the bottom, that it's really getting mixed around, that you're kind of doing your part to help that salt dissolve and mix up.
Excellent. Well, yeah, hopefully that'll help you out. And
yeah, good luck with filling your tank. We also have a great blog post that kind of walks you actually step by step through the process that we use up on the Float Tank Solutions blog. So if you do
start by adding 327 pounds of salt.
Yeah, it gives you the recipe. So if you do a little search on our blog for filling a tank, you'll come up with that one too. So have a nice handy resource.
All right. If you guys have questions you want us to answer, you can always jump onto floattanksolutions.com/podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.